The Galactic Council was deep in a long debate when the alarms began to echo through the hall. At first, the delegates thought it was a system error. Their sensors often picked up drifting rocks, stray signals, or old satellites. But the tone of this alarm was different. It carried a sharp urgency that made every delegate fall silent. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the monitoring screens along the walls activated on their own, showing something that made even the oldest species pause. Unsure of what they were looking at, 3 shapes were drifting toward the Council's central star system. They were smooth, silent, and almost shapeless at first, like pieces of night sky that had broken off and begun to move on their own. Their surfaces did not shine, reflect, or scatter any light. The ships looked like shadows that had gained weight. Nothing about them made sense. No current technology allowed a ship to be made from something that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. Delegates murmured among themselves, confused and uneasy. Many assumed it was some kind of natural distortion. But the readings kept sharpening, and soon the truth became impossible to ignore. These were not accidents of space. These were vessels, 3 enormous warships moving with controlled precision toward the Council's homeworld. But no known species had the power to hide a ship inside dark matter. No one had even proven it was possible to manipulate dark matter at all. Even more unsettling was the transmission that followed. A single data packet reached the Council's network, simple and short, carrying a message written in clean, universal language. It stated that the approaching vessels belonged to humanity. That alone caused an immediate wave of whispers. Humans were not known for advanced military strength. They had joined the wider galaxy only a short time ago, barely a generation. They had been seen as bright and creative, yes, but still inexperienced compared to ancient civilizations that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. So, how could a species considered young be commanding warships that bent the laws of physics? The encrypted packet that came with the message was even more confusing. Council technicians tried to open and decode it. The layers of protection were so advanced that their systems could not even understand where to start. It was like trying to unlock a door without knowing what a door was. Even the most advanced species stared at the data in disbelief. Some suspected the humans were bluffing. Others doubted the ships were real. A few feared humanity had gained access to something dangerous, something no civilization should have access to. As the warships drew nearer, sensors captured more details. Their surfaces flickered between existence and disappearance, like they were sliding in and out of the very space they occupied. They traveled without creating the usual energy trails, and yet they moved with absolute control. It was as if gravity itself made room for them wherever they passed. Their engines had no heat signatures. Their weapons arrays were invisible until viewed through gravitational scanners. The overall design was too advanced for any of the Council's scientific models to understand. Despite all the confusion and rising tension, the ships acted peacefully. They followed every space traffic rule, slowed when directed, and sent polite status updates. But none of that made the Council feel calmer. Peaceful or not, the sight of such impossible technology made every representative feel exposed. The Council leader finally called for order. Delegates stopped whispering and focused on the center of the chamber as the leader spoke with controlled calm. She announced that humanity had requested a diplomatic meeting. They wished to speak with the Council in person. The request sounded harmless, polite even, but everyone in the hall knew it carried a weight that could reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. Some delegates immediately objected. They argued that the Council should not allow such powerful warships near their capital without understanding what they were capable of. Others argued that refusing the request could make the humans suspicious or insulted. A few suggested that humanity's polite tone meant they were not here for conflict. But even those voices trembled slightly as they spoke. courtesy from someone carrying overwhelming power did not always bring comfort. Things grew even more tense when analysts confirmed a new detail. The ships were not simply advanced, they were breaking measurable limits. Their hulls were made from a substance that absorbed forces instead of resisting them. Their engines did not push against space, but shaped it. Their weapons arrays interacted with gravitational wells in ways previously believed impossible. Nothing about the ships matched any known science. The idea that humanity had mastered dark matter was shocking enough. But mastering it so fully, and in such a short time, was something no one could understand. Delegates studied humanity's message again, trying to find hidden meaning or deception. But there was none. It simply said that humanity wished to speak, that the matter was urgent, and that they approached in peace. For hours the council debated what to do. The discussion grew so long that many delegates had to rest in their seats, drained and tense. The thought of turning the ships away was frightening. The thought of allowing them in was equally frightening. They had no idea what humanity wanted to discuss, and that uncertainty wrapped the whole chamber in unease. But one thing became clear. The council could not pretend this event was small or normal. The galaxy had changed the moment those dark ships appeared on the sensors. Eventually, the council agreed to allow the humans to approach the capital, but under strict supervision and transparent monitoring. The human vessels complied easily. They followed every instruction clearly, never making sudden moves or suggesting any aggressive action. Their cooperation was almost too perfect, and that made some delegates even more nervous. When the ships finally entered the council's orbit, the entire capital watched from the ground. People filled balconies and rooftops, staring upward at the three dark silhouettes drifting in the sky. Many had never seen a human vessel before. Now they were seeing something that barely qualified as a ship at all. It looked more like a piece of the night sky that had broken free and decided to explore daylight. Inside the council chamber, the tension was thick enough to feel. Delegates tapped their fingers, shifted in their seats, and exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone sensed that whatever was about to happen would be remembered for centuries. A soft tone echoed across the room as the humans sent a final request to land the diplomatic shuttle. The request included no threat, no demand, no sign of arrogance. It was polite, respectful, almost humble. But that humility only made the moment feel more intense. When someone with unimaginable power spoke softly, it was far more unsettling than if they had shouted. For many species in the chamber, the realization settled in slowly. Humanity had somehow unlocked a door the rest of the galaxy never even found. The dark matter warships were not a display of arrogance, but a sign of how much the galaxy had underestimated the human race. As the shuttle descended toward the council's landing platform, every delegate understood one thing clearly. Their world was not the same as it had been that morning. Everything had shifted. Everything had changed. Humanity had arrived, not with threats or demands, but with a presence so powerful that it shook the council to its core simply by existing, in whatever message the humans carried inside that shuttle was going to matter more than anything they had heard in the last 100 years. The moment the human shuttle landed on the council's platform, the entire capital felt a kind of quiet tension settle over it. Citizens from dozens of species gathered on the surrounding balconies, rooftops, and streets. They wanted to see the newcomers who had arrived in ships made of something the galaxy barely understood. Even the winds seemed to slow, as if nature itself sensed something unusual was unfolding. The shuttle opened with a slow, calm motion. It didn't hiss with steam or glow with harsh energy signatures. Instead, a faint shimmer spread around the structure, like invisible dust falling away. The first figure stepped out, wearing a simple suit, clean, smooth, and unarmored. For a moment, the crowd seemed surprised. The human envoy did not look like someone who commanded impossible ships. They looked normal. Too normal. Almost. The envoy nodded politely to the council guards. No dramatic gestures, no arrogance. Just a quiet confidence. But that confidence alone sent a wave of whispers through the watching crowd. A representative of a young species, standing with such steady calm in the heart of the galaxy's most powerful institution. It did not feel ordinary at all. Inside the chamber, the delegates sat stiffly, pretending to be at ease while their eyes remained locked on the human. The envoy walked to the center platform and stopped under the soft white lights. Even the air felt heavier, as if the room itself knew this moment mattered. Everyone expected the human to begin with a statement about peace or cooperation. Instead, the envoy took a slow breath and said something that made the chamber fall into complete stillness. We are here because something important is coming. Something the galaxy has not seen before. There were no harsh tones, no raised voice. But the seriousness in those words made every delegate lean forward slightly. The envoy tapped a small circular device on their wrist. A soft projection grew like fog taking shape, forming a giant map of the galaxy. It rotated silently above the council floor. Everyone recognized the spiral shape, the clusters of stars, the borders drawn by decades of agreements. But then the envoy highlighted a region far beyond the known routes and empty. Dark stretch of space that most species never bothered to study. This area, the human said gently, is where we made first contact with something strange. There was a stir of unease. A few delegates exchanged quick glances. Humans making first contact outside mapped space was already unusual. But the envoy continued without changing tone. Our dark matter ships were built to explore places where normal matter cannot exist safely. And during one of our missions, we found signs of an intelligence that does not behave like any form of life known to us. A soft ripple traveled through the chamber. Whispers rose, then faded again when the envoy lifted a hand for silence. We are not here to alarm you, the human continued. But it is important that the council understands the scale of what is moving toward the galaxy. The projection changed. A faint wave-like pattern appeared beyond the galactic rim. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a species. It was something else, something large and slow and deliberate. The envoy explained that it behaved like a kind of cosmic predator, one that did not feed on stars or planets, but on the basic matter that made up physical reality. A type of hunger that couldn't be reasoned with. It did not communicate, negotiate, or act with intention the way life normally does. It simply consumed. Many delegates found themselves gripping the edges of their seats. The thought of something that fed on matter itself felt unreal. One delegate finally raised a trembling hand and asked how the humans survived something like that. The envoy replied calmly, saying the dark matter ships were built for such environments. They were designed to operate where normal matter would dissolve or collapse under strange pressures. That was how humanity was able to observe the phenomenon without being destroyed. Delegates didn't speak for several seconds after that. The idea that humans who had joined the galactic community only recently had developed technology so advanced that they could survive impossible conditions made everyone uneasy. A representative from an old, proud species stood and asked sharply how humans could expect the council to believe all of this. The envoy simply nodded and adjusted the projection again. A new image appeared, rough footage taken from one of the dark matter ships. It showed reality bending in strange ways, bright threads of energy stretching and vanishing like fabric pulled and torn apart. In that shifting light, something moved, something so large and unclear that the recording struggled to capture it. A shape without a clear form, drifting like a shadow inside a starless ocean. Gasps filled the chamber. The footage was disturbing, but not violent. It simply showed something that should not exist. The envoy spoke with a steady voice. We are not here to create fear. We are here because the galaxy deserves to be prepared. Humanity cannot face this alone, and neither can any single species. The way the envoy said it, calm, sincere, without ego, made the statement feel heavier. They were not boasting about the dark matter ships. They were not displaying power. They were admitting something else. The galaxy needed to stand together. Yet that idea didn't bring relief. Instead, it made some delegates nervous. One representative leaned forward and asked what exactly humanity wanted from the council. Another asked if this was a hidden attempt to gain influence. Others whispered about past conflicts, old rivalries, and the possibility that the humans had exaggerated the situation. The envoy let the questions rise. They didn't interrupt. They waited until the room quieted again. We want cooperation, the human finally said. Not control, not authority. Cooperation. The danger we discovered will not arrive tomorrow. But it is moving. Slowly. Consistently. We have time. But only if we use it wisely. The envoy paused, then added something that struck the entire chamber. Like a silent shock. The reason we came in ships that frightened you is simple. Nothing else could survive what we found. The delegates stared at the human in confusion. Some species had warships large enough to block out sunlight. Others had weapons sharp enough to slice through asteroids. But what the human implied was that none of those mattered. Not against an enemy. The consumed matter itself. In the high balcony above. Hundreds of citizens watched the human standing calmly under the galaxy map projection. They whispered among themselves, not knowing whether to be afraid or grateful. Back on the floor, the envoy spoke gently, almost regretfully. The galaxy is full of brilliant civilizations. Old ones, wise ones. You have taught us so much. We aren't here to replace anyone. We are here to share what we found, because if we don't, the cost will be too great for all of us. The sincerity in those words changed the mood. Even species known for their skepticism felt a shift inside. Humans weren't acting as conquerors. They weren't bragging about their ships. They weren't demanding submission or power. They were asking for unity. But the problem was not simple. Some delegates feared the unknown threat more than the humans. Others feared the humans more than the unknown threat. And some feared both. They argued quietly, wondering if humanity's new technology meant the council was no longer the center of power in the galaxy. Still, the envoy did not raise their voice or argue back. They simply let the delegates speak, allowing the chamber to release the fear it had been holding. After nearly an hour of tension, the envoy added one final statement. We did not come to intimidate you with our technology. We came because if we don't work together, no ship, no shield, no empire will be enough. The chamber fell silent. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, not a breath. The delegates looked at each other, realizing that even if they doubted the details, the humans believed what they were saying. And the calm confidence in the envoy's voice suggested they were telling the truth. Outside, the crowd watched as the projection faded and the envoy bowed politely. The galaxy wasn't used to seeing a species so young speak with such quiet authority. It wasn't used to being warned by someone it once considered harmless. But as the human walked out of the chamber, one thought spread across the council, slowly, heavily, and unavoidably. If humanity had discovered something dangerous enough to build ships from the shadows of the universe itself, then the galaxy had entered a new age, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. The council chamber remained strangely quiet long after the human envoy left. Delegates sat in their seats as if glued there, unsure how to react to what they had just heard. Some stared at the fading projection, still echoing in their minds. Others tapped their fingers nervously, unable to hide their worry. A few simply sat with their eyes lowered, trying to understand the scale of the problem humanity had brought to their doorstep. Outside, the capital city buzzed with conversation. Citizens talked in hushed tones as they repeated the same questions over and over. Why had humanity been able to find something the galaxy never noticed? How did they survive in a region of space where matter barely behaved like matter? And most of all, what exactly was that strange force moving toward them? Back inside, the council's emergency session finally began. It was supposed to be a controlled discussion, but the moment it opened, the chamber erupted into overlapping voices. Some delegates argued that the humans were exaggerating. Others said the recording looked too real to ignore. A few insisted that this was proof the humans had become too advanced too quickly. They felt threatened not by the unknown danger, but by the species that had discovered it. At the center of the room, the council leader sat quietly, watching the chaos unfold. Her face showed no panic, but the tension in her posture was hard to hide. She had led the council through countless disputes, economic crises, and political feuds. But nothing had ever shaken the chamber like the news brought by humanity. As the debate grew louder, one representative finally stood and raised a hand. "Before we fear the humans," he said calmly, "perhaps we should fear what they warned us about." The room quieted a little, but the tension didn't fade. The representative continued, explaining that humanity had shown something beyond normal concern. They had shown a threat that was not born from war or conflict, but from the vast, uncaring structure of the universe itself. Something enormous, something patient, something that didn't rise in anger or move out of hunger in the traditional sense. It simply existed, and its existence created danger. The council leader finally spoke, her voice steady and clear. "We must understand what humanity faced. We cannot make a decision based on fear, pride, or division. Bring in the human envoy again. We need more information." Minutes later, the envoy returned. They walked in with the same calm steps, standing once more in the center of the hall. Their face showed a mix of respect and weariness, as if they knew what was coming. One delegate stood immediately. "How did your people discover this thing?" he asked, avoiding dramatic wording, but unable to hide his unease. The envoy nodded. "We didn't set out looking for it," the human explained. "We were exploring regions where normal matter becomes unstable. Our scientists believed dark matter travel might reveal parts of the universe hidden from regular sensors." The envoy paused before continuing. "What we found was not a creature in the usual way. It had no body, no shape we could easily describe. It behaved like a force, a movement, something that interacts with space itself. Where it passed, things changed. Not destroyed, changed. Matter became thinner, weaker, almost like it was fading." A soft murmur rose through the chamber. "And your ships survived this?" a delegate asked. "Barely," the envoy admitted. "Our hulls absorbed the shift, but our systems struggled to stay stable. We learned quickly that this thing does not target life. It does not target planets. It does not target stars. It interacts with everything the same way." The envoy lifted their hand slightly, as if weighing invisible words. "It feeds on the very fabric of physical reality." The silence that followed was heavier than the earlier ones. Delegates who had doubted the humans suddenly found themselves gripping their armrests. Those who had dismissed the warning began to rethink their stance. Even those who secretly resented humanity realized the galaxy had never faced anything like this. One representative finally gathered the courage to ask the question everyone else feared. "How close is it?" The envoy took a slow breath. "Far, very far. But distance in deep space is not what matters. It moves slowly but consistently, and it does not stop." Someone whispered something too quietly to understand, but the room felt the fear behind it. Another delegate, stood and spoke, trying to sound calm, but failing a little. Why did it not follow your ships? If it reacts to matter, then why did it not chase you? It doesn't chase, the human said gently. It simply moves. It does not choose. It does not react. It does not think the way life does. A delegate from one of the older species turned pale. Then how do you know it is coming toward us? The envoy looked around the room before answering. When we first detected it, we believed it was drifting. But after months of study, we realized something unsettling. It wasn't drifting. It was following a path. A slow, steady path that has lasted longer than our species has existed. The chamber felt colder suddenly. What kind of path? The delegate asked. The envoy lifted a hand, and the galaxy projection returned. A glowing thread connected the far edge of the galaxy to the region where billions of stars gathered like a cosmic city. A path toward regions of high matter density, the envoy said. Not because it wants to attack, but simply because that is where the universe is thickest, where physics is strongest, where matter is richest. The delegates suddenly understood, It wasn't coming for them. It was coming because they existed. The realization shook even the proudest species. A delegate from a peaceful world stood, trembling slightly. So what do you expect us to do? Run? Hide? Wait? No, the envoy said softly. None of those would help. And we still have time, years, even decades. Maybe more. Enough to learn. Enough to prepare. Enough to understand this phenomenon better. Why come to us now? Another delegate asked. The human took a moment before replying. Because we saw what it did to a region near the edge of space. A place where matter once formed stars, but no longer does. A place that feels empty in a way that isn't natural. And if that pattern continues, it will eventually reach inhabited regions. The room fell into another long silence. Many delegates felt their pride shrinking. They realized that technology, power, or wealth meant nothing in the face of something that didn't even recognize life. It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a force of nature either. It was something in between, something that did not fit into any known category. A representative from a long-standing member species finally spoke with a calmer tone. What do you need from us? The envoy bowed their head politely. We need transparency, cooperation, shared research, shared monitoring, shared planning. Humanity cannot do this alone. We are strong in some areas, yes, but other species have wisdom older than our recorded history. Delegates exchanged glances. The human wasn't trying to lead them. They were trying to include them. A few representatives softened. Some nodded slowly. Others looked thoughtful for the first time, instead of fearful. But not everyone agreed. A delegate from a powerful military world stood and crossed their arms. And what if this danger is not real? What if this is your way of pushing the council to depend on you? The envoy looked directly at the delegate, not with anger, but with a sad, human honesty. If this was a trick, why would we risk our people exploring a place where matter breaks apart? Why build ships that took generations of research? Why come here with nothing but a warning instead of demands? The stern delegates said nothing in return. Their expression softened slightly, then faded into quiet thought. Finally, the council leader stood, signaling the end of the session. We will consider everything presented today, she announced, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of the moment. We will not act in panic or pride, but we will not ignore what we have seen. As the delegates prepared to exit, many looked at the human envoy differently. Not as a threat, not as someone showing off power, but as someone carrying responsibility heavy enough to bend the spirit. Outside, the city continued buzzing with curiosity. Citizens stared up at the sky, at the three dark shapes orbiting their world. They felt small, But they also felt something else. Hope. Because if humanity had survived such a place and still chose to warn the galaxy instead of hiding the truth, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to face whatever was coming. The envoy stepped out onto the balcony, breathing the cool air. They didn't look like a hero. They didn't act like one either. They looked like a human carrying a burden, one they had chosen to share with the galaxy. And for the first time, the council understood. Humanity had not come to frighten them. Humanity had come because the galaxy mattered to them. And that simple truth shook the galaxy more deeply than any dark matter warship ever could. When the council finally announced that they wanted a demonstration of humanity's new technology, the request spread through the capital like lightning. Every news board, every holoscreen, and every public square buzzed with the same question. What can these dark matter ships actually do? People had already seen them floating silently in orbit, 3 giant shapes that looked more like pieces of night sky than machines. But seeing them from far away was very different from seeing what they were capable of. Some were curious, some were excited, and some were quietly afraid, wondering if the humans had created something even they couldn't fully control. The demonstration was scheduled for the next day. Early in the morning, thousands crowded the observation zone around the council's central testing field. It was a huge open area, protected by layers of shielding, normally used for scientific experiments or peaceful engine tests. Today, however, it felt more like a stage preparing for the unknown. Council guards monitored every entrance. Representatives from dozens of species filled the raised platforms. Even the council leader herself stood on the highest balcony with a calm expression that barely covered her worry. She had agreed to this demonstration, but she knew that once the galaxy saw what humanity's ships could truly do, there would be no returning to old politics. The balance of authority would shift, whether anyone liked it or not. Above the field, one of the human dark matter ships hovered silently. Its surface wasn't metal or crystal or energy. It was something indescribable, something that looked like darkness molded into a shape. It bent light around itself in a way that made it feel unreal, like it wasn't fully in the same world as everything around it. A circular platform rose from the ground. The human envoy stepped onto it and faced the countless pairs of eyes watching them. The envoy didn't appear nervous. They carried themselves with the same quiet confidence they had during the council session. But there was something heavier in their expression today, as if they understood the weight of the moment. "We appreciate the council's trust," the envoy began. Their voice echoed across the field through soft speakers. "We will show you only what is necessary, not more, not less." Their words were calm, even gentle, but the effect on the crowd was powerful. Everyone leaned forward slightly, waiting. The envoy tapped the small wrist device they always wore. Instantly, the dark matter ship responded. It slowly shifted to a lower altitude, its presence darkening the sky above. The field like a moving eclipse. The envoy raised one hand. "We call this capability the gravitic veil." For a second, nothing happened. The air felt normal. The lights around the field flickered in their usual way. People blinked, unsure what they were supposed to see. And then, without warning and without sound, the world changed. Every vibration stopped. The hum of the city vanished. The winds froze. Not blowing, not settling, simply gone. Even the distant noises of crowds and machines and life fell silent. It was as if someone had turned the entire universe's volume dial down to 0. Delegates looked around in shock. Some moved their lips, trying to speak, but no sound came out. Even breathing felt different, lighter, too light. Some felt like the air wasn't air anymore, like they were inhaling something smoother, emptier. Every person in the room instantly knew this was not a weapon. It was not an attack. Nothing harmful touched them. But the sensation, The complete rearrangement of reality's normal behavior was enough to send a tremor of fear down even the bravest spines. The envoy stood quietly, allowing the moment to settle into everyone's awareness. Their voice finally broke the silence, not loudly, but with crystal clarity, as if the veil itself recognized the envoy's words as something exempt from its effects. "This is a very small demonstration," the human said. "A controlled manipulation of local gravitational structure." People stared, unable to understand how something so soft, so calm, could change the world so completely. The envoy lowered their hand. The veil disappeared. Reality snapped back, not violently, but gently. Sounds returned slowly, the wind first, and faint murmurs. Then the full noise of the city, returning as if waking from a dream. Many delegates inhaled sharply, as if they had been holding their breath. Others looked around in disbelief, touching their faces or robes to confirm they were still themselves. The envoy waited until the noise settled again. "This is one of the tools our ships use to travel through unstable space," the human explained. "The veil protects the ship by separating it from the physical vibrations that can break normal matter." A representative from an older species raised a trembling hand. "You altered reality," he said. "You shaped space." The envoy nodded gently. "Only within a safe boundary, and only because we must." A representative from a technological world spoke next, voice tight with disbelief. "How can you do this without harming anyone?" "Our own experiments with gravitational fields are based on forcing the universe to behave differently," the envoy said softly. "Ours are based on respecting the structure of dark matter and letting it guide the effect." This explanation didn't clarify everything, but it made something clear. The humans were working with a kind of science the galaxy hadn't even dreamed of. Another delegate leaned forward. "If used in conflict, could this veil—" "No," the envoy interrupted gently but firmly. "It was never designed for conflict. It cannot be shaped like a weapon, only as protection." Those words surprised the entire chamber. Many had assumed that humanity would proudly demonstrate power. Instead, the envoy was showing restraint. But sometimes, restraint was even more intimidating. The council leader finally stood. "Human envoy," she said slowly, "your technology is remarkable, but the fear it brings is not small. Many here worry that if a species can alter space so easily, nothing can stop them." The envoy looked directly at her. "That is exactly why we showed you this," they replied. "Because if we hid it, it would create even more fear. We want no secrets. Not now. Not when something far worse than our differences is moving toward all of us." The leader nodded thoughtfully. Some delegates shifted in their seats. A few looked at the envoy with new respect. Others looked with quiet anxiety, realizing that humanity had walked into the heart of the galaxy, not to intimidate, but to be transparent. But then the atmosphere shifted again when a delegate from a proud military species spoke sharply. "So humans can bend gravity. So your ships can disappear and reappear. So you can silence the world with a gesture. What does that make you then? A superpower? A new authority?" The envoy smiled gently, not smugly, not arrogantly. Just a tired, human smile. "It makes us responsible," they said. Nothing more. Those words struck the crowd differently than anything shown in the demonstration. The human tone, soft, honest, unpolished, made the moment strangely emotional, because responsibility was not the word a conqueror used. It was the word of someone carrying a burden. The envoy took a breath. "You do not need to fear us. Fear comes from secrets and confusion. That is why we showed you the veil. And this is why we are here, not to lead, not to command, but to warn." The ship above hummed gently, almost like it agreed with the envoy's words. The envoy continued. "We want to protect life. All life. Your children, your cities, your worlds. The phenomenon we found does not care who we are or what we believe. It does not know the difference between species. It does not choose victims. They paused. It simply moves. And it changes whatever it touches. The silence that followed wasn't from the veil this time. It was natural, heavy, full of thought. The demonstration had changed everything. Not just because the humans had shown power, but because they had shown humility. They had shown worry. And they had shown that they were afraid too, afraid of something larger than any species. The council leader stepped forward again, addressing both the envoy and the crowd. "We have seen what your ships can do," she said, "and we have heard your warning. The council will evaluate your proposal for cooperation. But today, let it be clear that the galaxy is entering a new chapter, one we must face together." A soft applause rose, not loud, not celebratory, but respectful. The envoy bowed their heads slightly, and just like that, the demonstration ended. But its effects didn't. Delegates returned to their stations changed. Citizens returned to their homes changed. Even the sky, with the dark matter ship drifting gently above it, seemed changed, because now the galaxy understood something important. Humanity's strength wasn't just in the ships they built, Dot. It was in the responsibility. They chose to carry Dot, and that truth shook the council more deeply than any display of power. When the long night finally began to lift around the Galactic Council chamber, most delegates sat in silence, unable to speak. The human fleet had shown only a fraction of its dark matter abilities. Yet that tiny moment had shaken thousands of years of belief. The demonstration had not harmed anyone, but it had made every species in the chamber understand one thing clearly. Humanity had stepped into a field that no one else had even dared to enter. And now the galaxy needed them more than ever. The human envoy stood calmly at the center, hands folded behind his back. There was no pride on his face, no arrogance, just a quiet seriousness. He knew what the delegates were thinking. He knew they were afraid. He knew they were questioning their entire understanding of physics, technology, and security. But he also knew there was no time for ego. There was only time for truth. The council leader finally spoke with a shaking voice. He looked older than he had just hours before. He asked the envoy if the threat humanity detected was truly coming closer. The envoy nodded once, steady and firm, explaining that their dark matter detectors had recorded the foreign presence moving along a path that would eventually cross several inhabited sectors. It did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It simply consumed, as if feeding on the building blocks of existence. The chamber grew heavy again. Many delegates shifted nervously, others whispered, and some covered their faces in worry. The envoy did not push them or pressure them. He waited. Humans understood fear, but they also understood how to move through fear. That was what made them different. After long debate, long arguments, and even longer silence, the council decided to grant humanity temporary command authority over all defensive forces. It was not an easy decision. Some species feared they were giving humans too much power. But the majority understood the simple truth. No one else had the tools or knowledge to face what was coming. Human engineers and officers began walking through the chamber, speaking with different species, explaining what would happen next. Their voices were calm, patient, and respectful. They offered support, explained systems, showed them parts of the new defensive technology. They did not share everything, but they shared enough to help the galaxy prepare. One of the delegates from a cautious world stepped forward, asking why humans had hidden their dark matter inventions for so long. The envoy replied softly that humanity had not been hiding anything. They had simply been cautious. Their early experiments with dark matter physics had nearly destroyed entire research stations. They wanted to be sure it was safe before they ever revealed it to the galaxy. They wanted to understand it well enough to use it responsibly. And most of all, they wanted to avoid causing fear. But now there was no choice. The threat was real, and everyone had to stand together. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed faster than anyone expected. Human scientists set up learning centers across council worlds. They taught basic principles of dark matter shielding so planets could protect their populations. They installed early warning scanners on key outposts. They even redesigned some older starships so they could survive longer if the foreign presence moved into their region. For the first time in generations, species that barely spoke to each other began working side by side. Engineers who once doubted humans now watched them with new respect. Soldiers who feared humans now understood why they stepped forward. Even leaders who wanted to limit human influence began to see that humanity's strength came from something deeper than technology. It came from their will to protect life, any life. On one council world, a group of young researchers asked the human envoy how humans found the courage to push into dark matter space when no one else dared. He explained that courage was not something humans were born with. It was something they built slowly, through trial, struggle, and failure. They pushed because they believed that progress only came when someone took the first step, even if the step was risky. And they pushed because they felt a responsibility to explore the unknown instead of hiding from it. His quiet words stayed with the young researchers long after he left. As the threat moved closer to the edge of the mapped galaxy, humanity began deploying more of its dark matter warships. These vessels were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Their shapes shifted, fading in and out of sight as if they were half real. Their engines did not burn or roar. They hummed like distant thunder. Their hulls absorbed light instead of reflecting it, like shadows turned solid. When the first full fleet emerged over a council capital world, people from every species gathered in the streets to watch. The ships did not look aggressive, but their presence carried a heavy weight. It was like standing near a storm, powerful, steady, and impossible to ignore. Many citizens felt nervous, but also strangely hopeful. They realized that if these were the ships humanity had built to defend the galaxy, then maybe the galaxy still had a chance. The council leader held a final, emergency session to prepare for the approaching danger. Humanity explained that the foreign presence was not a traditional enemy. It did not attack with weapons or fleets. It simply erased matter, as if dissolving it. Dark matter fields were the only known barrier it could not cross. That was why humanity had been able to get close enough to study it. Some delegates asked if humanity could destroy it completely. The envoy did not give false hope. He said they could try. They would do everything in their power. But he also reminded everyone that this was new territory for all of them. They would face the unknown together. The council chamber, once filled with fear, now settled into a strange kind of unity. Delegates who once argued now spoke with shared purpose. Worlds that once competed now cooperated freely. Humanity had not forced them to work together. They had inspired them. As fleets across the galaxy aligned with human command protocols, the sky above countless worlds began to glow with movement. Human dark matter vessels took the lead, their forms slipping like shadows across the stars. Behind them followed ships from every major species, some old, some upgraded, some barely functional, but all of them ready to defend their homes. Citizens everywhere watched as the armada stretched across the night. No one had ever seen a fleet this large, this diverse, or this unified. People whispered that this was the moment the galaxy changed forever. And they were right. The human envoy, standing aboard the lead warship, looked out at the fleet. He did not smile, but his eyes held determination. He knew the coming fight would be hard. He knew they might not fully understand the enemy until the very last moment. But he also knew this. Humanity had stepped into the unknown before. They had survived challenges that seemed impossible. They had always risen when it mattered. And now the entire galaxy would rise with them. The alarm tones sounded softly through the ship as they approached the border of mapped space. The strange foreign presence was somewhere beyond that darkness, silent and dangerous. The fleet slowed, preparing for first contact. Across the armada, lights dimmed. Engines lowered their output. Shields thickened into dark layers. An entire galaxy held its breath. The envoy gave the final order with a steady voice. Advance. The human fleet slipped into the dark frontier first, their hulls shimmering as they entered the strange boundary where normal matter began to distort. Council ships followed carefully, trusting the guidance protocols humanity had shared. Stars blurred. Space bent. And still the fleet pushed forward. Somewhere in that swirling region of unknown space, the danger waited. But so did the hope of every world watching from behind them. What began as fear in the council chamber had grown into something new, something that felt stronger than technology, deeper than power. It was trust. It was unity. It was the knowledge that no matter what was coming, they would not face it alone. As the human warships led the armada deeper into the dark, the galaxy stood ready for whatever came next, knowing that humanity, once underestimated, once ignored, had become their greatest shield. And this time, the stars themselves seemed to watch, waiting to see what the united galaxy would become.